Good evening and welcome to Primetime News, coming to you live and direct from the Newsfirst studios here in Colombo. I'm Bernadine Jai Singha. Let's now take a look at headlines.
Government launches new medical insurance scheme named Nagaraja Shakyaputra for the family members of Buddhist priests. All 11 inmates killed in the Mahara prison riot had died of gunshot injuries. Ukraine enters a 17-day nationwide lockdown to curb the spread of COVID-19 in the country. Another 140 Ukraine nationals arrived at the Mattala International Airport today. US President Donald Trump promises orderly transition after Congress confirms Biden's presidency.
An insurance scheme for Buddhist priests was launched under the patronage of Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa today.
The Nagaraja Shakyaputra medical insurance scheme that was launched at Temple Trees today will provide medical cover for the parents and siblings of Buddhist priests. According to the Prime Minister's office, a payment ranging between 1,000 rupees and 15,000 rupees will be made in the case of hospitalization. Payments up to 25,000 rupees will also be issued to undergo medical tests or to purchase medicines during the period of hospitalization. The Prime Minister's office noted that a premium of 2,000 rupees must be paid annually and that devotees could offer the money during charity events.
All 11 inmates who died in last year's Mahara prison riot had died of gunshot injuries suffered inside the prison premises. This was revealed at the Wattala Magistrates Court today.
According to the autopsy reports furnished to the court by the court-appointed 5-member committee of experts, it was revealed that all 11 inmates had died from gunshot wounds. Earlier, the committee of experts produced autopsy reports of 8 inmates. According to the autopsy reports of the 3 slain inmates produced today, it was revealed that they had tested negative for COVID-19. Accordingly, Wattala Magistrate Buddhika Sri Ragala ordered the Director General of Health Services to take necessary measures to bury them at an appropriate location at government expense.
The violence that erupted at the US Congress yesterday, claiming 5 lives, including a woman, has drawn the attention of several countries across the world. Amateur footage of the incident captured on a mobile has been circulating on social media since the unrest broke out at the Capitol Hill building in Washington, D.C. The video footage showing gunfire being opened at the premises of the Congress has not been independently verified by Newsfirst. We advise children and adults sensitive to graphic footage to avoid witnessing the visuals that will appear on your screen in 15 seconds.
Shots fired! Shots fired!
A US Capitol police officer has died of injuries sustained during clashes with supporters of President Donald Trump, who stormed the Capitol building to prevent Congress from certifying President-elect Joe Biden.
A statement release said Officer Brian D. Sicknick had sustained injuries while on duty, physically engaging with rioters at the U.S. Capitol. The Capitol Police and federal investigators said that the death of Sicknick will be investigated by the Metropolitan Police Department's Homicide Branch. Yesterday, President Trump told the crowd of his Save America rally that he will walk with them to the Capitol to cheer on their brave senators and congressmen and women.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women, because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength and you have to be strong.
At the conclusion of the rally, thousands walked to the Capitol. Prior to the walk to Capitol Hill, video footage of Trump and his associates in a tent behind the rally, anticipating the start of the rally, had been making its way around social media. Today, the top congressional Democrat Speaker Pelosi and Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer have urged Vice President Pence and Trump's cabinet to remove the president for his incitement of insurrection. In a joint statement, they said the president's dangerous and seditious acts necessitates his immediate removal from office. The duo called for Trump to be ousted using the 25th Amendment, which allows the vice president to step up if the president is unable to perform his duties owing to a mental or physical illness. But it would require Pence and at least 8 cabinet ministers to break with Trump and invoke the amendment. Under pressure, Donald Trump finally condemned the heinous attack.
Like all Americans, I am outraged by the violence, lawlessness, and mayhem. I immediately deployed the National Guard and federal law enforcement to secure the building and expel the intruders. America is and must always be a nation of law and order. The demonstrators who infiltrated the Capitol have defiled the seat of American democracy. To those who engaged in the acts of violence and destruction, you do not represent our country. And to those who broke the law, you will pay. A new administration will be inaugurated on January 20th. My focus now turns to ensuring a smooth, orderly, and seamless transition of power. This moment calls for healing and reconciliation.
After the protest at Capitol Hill, Education Secretary Betsy DeVos, one of the longest-serving members of President's administration, became the second cabinet member to quit. In her resignation letter, DeVos accused the president of fomenting Wednesday's disorder. She said, "There is no mistaking the impact your rhetoric had on the situation, and it is the inflection point for me." Earlier in the day, Transportation Secretary Elaine Chao stepped down, saying she had been deeply troubled by the rampage. Other aides to quit include Special Envoy Mick Mulvaney, a senior national security official, and the Chief of Staff to First Lady Melania Trump. A State Department advisor was also sacked after calling Trump unfit for office in a tweet.
The action filed by George Stewart Health Private Limited against MTV Channel Private Limited was taken up today before District Judge of Colombo, Honorable Rashanta Godawala, in Court Number 1. Counsel for MTV strenuously objected to the application to transfer the case from the District Judge of Colombo, Honorable Rashanta Godawala, to the Additional District Judge, Honorable Sandun Vitana, stating that parties should not select the bench to suit their wishes.
Having heard Mr. Egalahewa's submission that the plaintiff's documents filed yesterday with an affidavit was in complete contravention of the provisions of the Civil Procedure Code and seeking rejection in limine of the said motion and the documents filed along with it, Mr. Romesh De Silva PC, appearing on behalf of George Stewart Health Private Limited, made an application to court to transfer the case to the Honourable Additional District Judge Sandun Vitana on the basis that Court Number 6 Judge, namely Honourable Sandun Vitana, had granted the ex parte enjoining order and subsequently extended the enjoining order on 7th December 2020. Mr. Udita Egalahewa PC, who appeared on behalf of MTV, vehemently objected to the request to transfer the case to the Court of the Learned Additional District Judge and informed court that the practice of permitting parties to select judges is a perverse practice that affects the independence of the judiciary. He further submitted to court that after the 7th of December 2020, this case came up on 18th December 2020 and that there was a specific order made by another additional district judge to take this matter up before the District Judge of Colombo for inquiry and for further pleadings, and on that date no objections were raised by the plaintiff's counsel to take up this matter in Court Number 1 before the District Judge of Colombo. Therefore, in following the proper procedure, this case should rightly be taken up only in Court Number 1 before the said District Judge of Colombo and not be transferred to Court Number 6. Having heard submissions by both counsels, the court made an order that when one party has made a request to transfer the case to another court, it is not correct for the judge to hear the case, stating that one party could allege bias against the judge. Purely for that reason, the learned judge ordered that the case be transferred to Court Number 6 and that this matter be immediately taken up in Court Number 6. Thereafter, the case was taken up in Court Number 6 before Additional District Judge Honorable Sandun Vitana. Counsel for MTV, Mr. Udita Egalahewa PC, informed the court that a few moments ago, when this matter came up before the District Judge of Colombo, he had vehemently objected to the plaintiff's application to transfer the case to Court Number 6. Counsel reiterated the same objections before the Additional District Judge of Colombo, Honorable Sandun Vitana, and stated that there is an order already made on 18th December 2020 to take this case up in Court Number 1, and therefore Court Number 6 should not hear this case. Accordingly, the case will be called on 13th January 2021 for the Additional District Judge Honorable Sandun Vitana to make a suitable order with regard to the further steps of the case. Mr. Udita Egalahewa, President's Counsel, Mr. Jeevanta Jatilaka, Mr. Niranjan Arul Pragazam, Mr. Damita Karunaratna, Mr. N.K. Ashok Bharan, Mr. Miru Egalahewa and other counsels appeared for the defendant instructed by Mr. G.G. Arul Pragazam. Appearing for the plaintiff and for the interests of Dilit Javira, the chairman of the plaintiff company, was Mr. Ramesh De Silva PC and Mr. Ruantakure, attorney at law. Mr. Ruantakure earlier functioned as the senior-most junior at Mr. Ali Sabri's chambers prior to Mr. Sabri becoming the Minister of Justice. On a previous occasion too, Mr. Dilit Javira instituted an action before the Colombo District Court and obtained an enjoining order against another TV channel, and Mr. Dilit Javira's interests were then represented by Mr. Ali Sabri.
In Parliament today, reference was made to a statement made by Justice Minister Ali Sabri on room for extremism to grow in the country. The reference was made by Jatika Jana Balawege leader Andrew Kumara Disanayaka during an adjournment debate on COVID-19 today.
You might be successful in inciting racism to achieve short-term political objectives, but in the long run you won't be able to at least prevent your children from facing the repercussions of this trap. As parliamentarians and leaders of political movements who guide their respective factions, we must engage in politics devoid of racism. Attempts are being made to stir up racism in the country. The problem surrounding the cremation or burial of Muslims who die of COVID-19 is very sensitive. We cannot determine which faith is supreme over the other. Religion is a matter of personal beliefs. If a person is burying a deceased based on religious beliefs, it is obvious that going against that practice may create ripples in that community. We must understand that. Firstly, we must realize that the Muslims may be shocked by these actions. That must be understood. It is only then that a decision must be made on whether the deceased should be cremated or buried. We believe that a scientific approach is required to resolve this problem, but that approach must be adopted by understanding that a wrong decision may have a negative effect among the Muslim community. Do not disregard those matters, but they are using this problem to boost their racist agenda. How did Muslim parliamentarians conduct themselves in parliament? Except for Rishad Badiuddin and Rauf Hakim, the others voted in favor of the 20th Amendment. The government didn't count them as racist votes at that time. I observed how government parliamentarians clapped when they saw that the Muslim MPs had voted for the amendment to be passed. Their support was obtained to secure a two-thirds majority. But when these parliamentarians raise issues on their community, they are branded as racists. Is it fair to do that? The Muslim parliamentarians must be ashamed of themselves. Ali Sabri, who is in the government, recently said that these decisions may pave the way for extremism to develop in the country. On the 13th of December, the Divayana newspaper had reported about an extremist group led by a student from the Sri Jayawardhanapura University. What are the steps taken by the government to suppress this extremist group? A Buddha statue in Mavanalla had been attacked recently as well. It was widely reported in the media. The Defence Secretary during the victory of the war is now the President. Kamal Gunaratne, who served as a commanding officer during the war, is now the Defence Secretary. An admiral who served in the war is the minister overseeing the police. But still, Buddha statues are being attacked. How can this happen? These incidents are taking place in quick succession. Therefore, the country is being pushed into the trap of racism. Certain members of the government are trying to incite racism in the country. That is very evident. Therefore, I wish to tell the government that they can incite racism to fuel their short-term political gains, but it is pushing the country into the claws of destruction in the long run.
Parliamentarian S.M. Marikar made a revelation about incidents taking place centering the Colombo Stock Exchange and the banking sector of the country.
දැන් කොළඹ ලෑන්ඩ් කැපිටල් කියන සමාගමට එහෙම නැත්නම් ලිබර්ටි හෝල්ඩින් කියන සමාගම 2016 මහජන බැංකුවෙන් අරන් තියෙනවා.
In 2016, now State Minister Ajit Niwad Cabral had obtained a loan amounting to 1.6 billion rupees from the People's Bank via Colombo Land Capital, also known as Liberty Holdings. This loan has been rescheduled thrice. In January 2018, June 2019 and June 2020. They are now planning to reschedule this loan for the fourth time. The credit committee of the bank has disagreed to reschedule the loan again. However, the chairman of the bank has thereafter intervened in the matter. The chairman of the bank is a non-executive director. He does not have the right to interfere in matters pertaining to the credit committee of the bank. We have also learned of instances where the debt moratorium provided to certain institutions has been cancelled abruptly. The banks then urge these institutions to repay the remaining loan with immediate effect. If the institutions are unable to settle their commitments, they are urged to liquidate their equity stocks trading on the stock exchange and settle those loans. There is a hidden force that is benefiting from all this. It was the same during the previous regime. This force then obtains loans from the same banks that provided those moratoriums and purchases the shares that have been sold by those companies. Who is controlling this country? Is it President Rajapaksa or this businessman? We will continue to reveal such corrupt activities. We are not afraid and we will not step down. We urge the Prime Minister to investigate this matter. We urge him to take control of this invisible force and prevent our country's economy from being destroyed.
මේ රීරියකව පාලනය කරන්න දඬු කඳේ දාන්න එහෙම නැත්නම් ලංකාවේ ආර්ථිකය විනාශයි.
You're watching Primetime News. Let's now cross over to a short commercial break.
Do your online shopping now with Bulletin.lk to get it home delivered or pick up on your way.
Bulletin.lk.
Lasantha Vikramatunga, the fearless journalist. A dozen years ago, on a day like today, Lasantha Vikramatunga was brutally assassinated in broad daylight. Lasantha, who was the editor of the Sunday Leader newspaper at the time, threw caution to the wind in exposing those who engaged in corruption, even those in the upper echelons of the nation. Lasantha had a penchant for revealing the truth and exposing even the most clandestine misdealings, paving new ways in the field of investigative journalism. Lasantha's mightiest weapon was his pen. True to the saying, the pen is mightier than the sword, Lasantha used his natural talent, his words, to rid the nation of corruption. Lasantha was undeterred in his work, knowing fully well the substantial risk his line of work brought with it. He breathed his last on a fateful day like today, when he was assassinated in a cowardly attack along the Athidia road by those who feared his courageous attitude and verve. Lasantha, who was acclaimed for his service to the field of journalism and to the nation, was posthumously awarded the IPI World Press Freedom Hero Award. Since the 8th of January 2009, governments have ascended to power and conceded control to new ones. All the while, the cowardly minions responsible for the death of a courageous soul continue to roam free. Although Lasantha's remains were exhumed on the 27th of September 2016 and a number of arrests were made, no substantial or effective breakthrough has been made to date.
ෆස්ට ක්‍රියාවලට මේ මැර ක්‍රියාවලට එරෙහිව නැගී සිටිය යුතුයි. මේ පළවෙනි වතාවත් මේ වගේ සිද්ධියක් වෙලා තියෙන මේ අවසාන වතාවත් අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම නොවෙන්න පුළුවන්. ඒ වුණත් අපි අවධානයෙන් මේ තත්ත්වයට මුහුණ දීමට සූදානම් මාධ්‍ය ආයතන සියලු දෙනා එක්මුතු වී මෙයට මුහුණ දීමට සූදානම් විය යුතු බව පැහැදිලිව කිය යුතුයි.
A mere 48 hours prior to the demise of Lasantha Vikramatunga, on the 6th of January 2009, a gang of thugs attacked and destroyed the then state-of-the-art MTV-MBC broadcasting complex in Depanama. Lasantha raised his defiant voice even then, calling out for justice to be meted out against those responsible. Lasantha Vikramatunga was a close friend of the MTV-MBC family, sharing both the highs of triumph and the lows of despair equally. He was one of the very first people to arrive at the scene when the MTV-MBC broadcasting complex was vandalized. Attackers had fled the scene, setting up claymores at the main control room of the broadcasting complex in an attempt to instill fear within us. However, our unfaltering determination bore fruit when we were able to commence broadcasting once again on all 3 channels within a short span of 4 hours.
MTV-MBC studio complex in the Panama was attacked.
Bombings, assassinations, and acts of arson cannot silence those who stand for justice, honesty, and integrity. Dishonest men fear the inescapable truth. The truth always wins. The trust placed in us by you, the people, will continue to propel us towards creating a just and law-abiding society. Our dedication towards this ultimate goal will forever remain unwavered. The truth can never be hidden, and justice will always find its way to those who commit crimes.
The daughter of slain newspaper editor Lasantha Wickrematunge has filed a complaint with the UN Human Rights Committee seeking its assistance in probing the killing of her father.
A complaint has been filed with the UN Human Rights Committee by the US-based Center for Justice and Accountability and a law firm on behalf of Ahimsa Wickrematunge. The complainants point out that Sri Lanka has breached the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights over the killing of newspaper editor Lasantha Wickrematunge. The daughter of the late editor argued that the attacks violate 5 sections guaranteed in the covenant to which Sri Lanka is a party. This includes the right to life, right to freedom from torture or other cruel, inhumane or degrading treatment or punishment, rights to freedom of expression and opinion and non-discrimination, and access to effective remedy. The complainants point out that Sri Lanka cannot claim that the complaint is inadmissible for failing to exhaust domestic remedies. They argued that Sri Lanka offers no effective domestic remedies for the relief that Ahimsa seeks in connection to the killing. Accordingly, the complainants have requested the committee to extend its assistance in ensuring that Sri Lanka conducts an exhaustive, independent and effective investigation on the attacks against Lasantha, including prosecution of those responsible at all levels of the government. Apologizes to the Wickrematunge family for violating the covenant by the attacks and failing to investigate them. Gives meaningful guarantee to avoid repeating any conduct that violates the covenant, and provides adequate compensation to Ahimsa and Lasantha for breaching the covenant. The UN Human Rights Committee is a body of independent experts that monitor implementation of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights by its state parties. The complainants requested the committee to prioritize the complaint as it may have an impact on the protection of the rights of journalists in Sri Lanka.
Ukraine's government will enter into a 16-day lockdown with effect from today until the 25th. This measure was taken considering the prevailing COVID-19 situation in the country.
Daily detection of COVID-19 cases in Ukraine began last November. Accordingly, the Ukrainian government decided in December to tighten the COVID-19 restrictions starting from January. Currently, between 12,000 to 14,000 COVID-19 patients have been detected daily in Ukraine. At present, the number of COVID-19 infected people in the country stands over 1 million. 19,588 COVID-19 deaths have been reported thus far. 155 Ukrainians arrived in the country as Ukraine entered a 17-day lockdown starting today. The batch of tourists had arrived in the country at around 2:25 p.m. as part of the pilot tourism project that is underway. Issues surrounding the pilot tourism project involving Ukrainian tourists and the repatriation of Sri Lankan expatriates surfaced in Parliament today.
Udayanga is claiming that he works with the Presidential Task Force. This raises questions on the purpose of a tourism authority. This is how the members of one clan think alike. How many tourists have tested positive for COVID-19? Ukraine is one of the worst affected countries by the COVID-19 pandemic. The Ukrainian Prime Minister has declared a countrywide lockdown from the 7th to the 24th of January. A new strain of the virus has been detected in the United Kingdom as well. That is dangerous as its virulence is high. New strains of the virus have been detected in Ukraine as well. The situation has led to a lockdown in their nation. Against such a backdrop, I wish to question their decision to bring down more batches of tourists from Ukraine. The trip made by the tourist Yala has also been mired in concerns. Listen to the problems outlined by a youth named Gayan, who is the main organizer of Namal Rajapaksa. The safari jeep drivers who attempted to earn a living have ultimately ended up in quarantine centers for 14 days, while tourists were allowed to roam freely in the country without undergoing quarantine. The drivers were to be taken to Busa. Ultimately, it was Namal who intervened and ensured that the drivers are taken to a hotel in Tissamaharama. Who is handling the transportation facilities? It is the relatives of those in power. The selected hotels are ones belonging to their allies. Travel tickets to the US can only be purchased from Upul Travels. This grants him the advantage to decide on the ticket cost. The expatriate workers are thankful to Namal Rajapaksa because he had the backbone to declare that the process is embroiled in corruption.
We held discussions with the Prime Minister and decided to increase the number of repatriation flights from next week. A notion then emerged that paid quarantine would be made mandatory. It is not compulsory. More than 45,000 workers who returned to the country were allowed to undergo quarantine free of charge. Based on the instructions of the President, Sri Lankan workers will continue to be repatriated and allowed to undergo quarantine at state-run centres without any cost. The COVID-19 task force, the Foreign Ministry and the Health Ministry will take the relevant steps in this regard. At one point, it was said that workers can undergo quarantine free of charge at hotels. Just as we questioned during the party meeting, we wish to raise questions today as well on the hotels that are offering free quarantine and how many workers have benefited out of it. If quarantine at hotels is not offered free of charge, the relevant institutions in the government have the responsibility of informing the country that did not take place. Recently, the Army Commander and the COVID-19 task force informed that paid quarantine is not mandatory and that is optional. This would mean that people can undergo paid quarantine at hotels based on their wishes and that the government will provide quarantine facilities to the others without levying a single cent from the returnees. The government has organized repatriation flights from the 11th of this month. This is a national requirement that needs to be fulfilled. If a mafia is taking a hold of that process, we will not hesitate to voice our concerns against that as well.
You and Arundhika Fernando have said that there is a massive racket involved in the repatriation process and that workers have been unfairly charged. Therefore, I wish to question whether the charges that were levied unfairly from these workers would be returned to them. After all, this is their hard-earned money.
We are only assuming that a racket is in operation. We will be able to take legal action after investigating the matter if it is proven that irregularities had taken place in the process.
State Minister Dayasiri Jayasekara has tested positive for COVID-19. The State Minister said that he is currently receiving treatment at a facility in Hikkadua. Minister Udayanga Mampilla today replied to a statement recently made by MP Harin Fernando.
Who is ruling the country at present? One among them is a person dubbed as the Antigen Man, who runs a media institution. The other is Udayanga Veeratunga. The third is Nisanka Senadipati. The fourth is Dhammika. I will not name the fifth person, who is from Anuradhapura. Making a statement recently, my friend Harin Fernando humorously said that the president goes and visits the Anuradhapura Manian. Firstly, it was neither President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, nor Mahinda Rajapaksa, nor Maithripala who went. It was the former leader of the UNP, former President D.B. Wijetunga, who went there. Hema Premadasa has also gone. Members of the United National Party and the Samagi Jana Balawegaya, P. Harrison, former Secretary Akila Viraj Karyawasam, Talata Atukorala, Chandra Bandaranaike and Kings Nelson went there. There is a long list from the Samagi Jana Balawegaya. The most humorous thing is that even Harin Fernando too had made visits to Anuradhapura. It is he who paid the visits to the Anuradhapura Emanian.
The 122nd birth anniversary of founder of Sri Lanka Freedom Party, late SWRD Bandaranaike, was commemorated today.
The Sri Lanka Freedom Party had organised an event near a statue of the late SWRD Bandaranaike in Galle at around 8 am today. Former President Chandrika Bandaranaike Kumaratunga and her family members paid tribute to the statue before the commencement of the event. Journalists questioned the former president during the occasion.
Madam, ආගේ පියාණන් ආරම්භ කරපු ශ්‍රී ලංකා නිදහස් පක්ෂය ගැන මොකද හිතන්නේ?
මොකද හිතන්න ඕනේ? දැන් මේ වෙනකොට ශ්‍රී ලංකා නිදහස් පක්ෂයේ යන ගමන් මාර්ගය නිවැරදිද? ගමන් මාර්ගයක් නෑනේ. නිවැරදිද වැරදිද කියලා මට කියන්න බෑ. ශ්‍රී ලංකා නිදහස් පක්ෂයේ අසාධාරණකුත් වෙලා තියෙනවා කියලා දැන් ඉන්නකා පාර්ශවයේ කියනවා. ඒක ඉතින් දැන් අවුරුද්දකට ඉස්සෙල්ලා මම කිව්වනේ. ඒක කරයි කියලා. මං ගැලවිලා නෑ. මම පක්ෂ සදහටම ඉන්නවා. තවමත් මම පක්ෂ සභාපති, තවමත් මම පක්ෂේ යාවජීව අනුශාසක, තවමත් මම දේශපාලන මණ්ඩලයේ සභිකයෙක්.
ඔබතුමිය ගන්න පියවර ඉදිරියටවත් මොකද කරන්නේ? රැක ගැනීමට දැන්
මම පක්ෂේ රැකගෙන තිනවා 4 වතාවක් කොම්බ බිම ඇනලා වැටිච්ච හැම වතාවකම. ඉතින් දැන් අනේ පක්ෂේ ඉන කට්ටිය කරගෙන යයි. අද මේ උත්සවයේ දින 8ට ඔබතුමිය කලින් ආවේ මට කලින් එන්න ඕනේ නිසා. ඒ කියන්නේ ආරාධනාවක් කරේ නැද්ද මේ සැරේවත්? නෑ කිසිම ආරාධනාවක් නෑ. හැබැයි ඒගොල්ලන්ට මේක අයිති නෑනේ. ඉතින් අපිට ඕන වෙලාවකට අපි එනවා. මේ අලුත් ආණ්ඩුව ගැන ඔබතුමියගේ අදහස මොකද්ද? දැන් ඒව කතා කරන්න බෑ.
Former Minister Kumaravelgama arrived at the location afterwards.
මං කියන්නේ ශ්‍රී ලංකා නිදහස් පක්ෂය හොඳයි, ඉන්න නායකයෝ හොඳ නැහැ.
කවුද දැන් ඉන්නේ නායකත්වයේ? දැන් නායකත්වයට ඔබතුමා හිතනවාද කවුද ඉන්නේ යෝජනා කරන්නේ?
හොඳ කෙනෙක් එයි.
ඔබතුමාත් ඉන්නවද එතන?
මාත් එක්ක කෙනෙක් තමයි. මං නරකද? මං හොඳ නැද්ද? මට එක්ස්පීරියන්ස් එක නැද්ද?
දැන් රජයෙන් ගැලවිලා යයිද ශ්‍රී ලංකා නිදහස් පක්ෂය?
ඒක නම් කවදාවත් වෙන්නේ නැහැ බොරු කරන්නේ. ඒ කරන්නේ වෙන රජයෙන් ගැලවිලා යන්නේ නැහැ. ඒගොල්ලන්ට හොඳ අමාත්‍යාංශ ගන්න තමයි ඔය කරන්නේ. හමුදා සෙලුට් එකක් දාලා යන්නේ.
The official event organised by the Sri Lanka Freedom Party began later under the leadership of party chairman, former President Maithripala Sirisena.
හයවන විධායක ජනාධිපති මෛත්‍රීපාල සිරිසේන මැතිතුන්ට
චන්දිකා මැතිණිය කලින් ඇවිල්ලා පුෂ්ප පහ දක්වා ගියා.
ඔව් එතුමිය උදෑසනම ඇවිත් තිබෙනවා. විශේෂයෙන්ම එතුමාට අපි ස්තුතිවන්ත වෙනවා. එතුමිය උදේම ඇවිල්ලා කටයුතු වලට සහභාගී වෙලා තිබීම පිළිබඳව.
දැන් එතුමිය කියනවා තාම සමාජිකත්වයේ තියෙනවා. සභාපති එතුමිය අනුශාසක එතුමිය ඔබතුමාගේ සභාපතිත්වය පිළිගන්නේ නැහැ, නීති අනුකූල නැහැ කියලා.
ඉතින් අපි සාමාන්‍යයෙන් රට තුල වැඩ කරනකොට අපි තුල කිසිම වාද වේදයක් එහෙම කිසිම ප්‍රශ්නයක් නැහැ. අපි කවුරුත් එකට එකතු වෙලා වැඩ කරන්නේ.
ඊළඟ නිදහස් පක්ෂයේ ඉදිරියේදී ආණ්ඩුවත් එක්ක ඉතර යනවද? කලකිරීමෙන්ද?
අපි බලමු ඉතින් තව කල් තියෙනවනේ මොකක්ද ඉතින් දැන් ඉතින් මේ ආණ්ඩුව තියෙනවනේ. හොඳයි.
The Sena caterpillar that was first detected in the Ampara district has now spread across 8 provinces in the country. This caterpillar that initially destroyed only corn cultivations have now invaded pumpkin, bean and radish cultivations as well.
The locals of Kulagama in Mahakumbuk Kadawala earn a living by engaging in farming activities. But the Sena caterpillar has destroyed their cultivations, adding to their struggles to make ends meet. Sri Lanka faced a similar insect infestation back in 1972, identified as the brown hopper pest menace. Despite the lack of advanced technology back then, former Prime Minister Sirimavo Bandaranaike took action immediately to address this issue. Steps were taken to emit fertilizer from the air in the Ampara district.
The then government took immediate action to solve the crisis. The Sena caterpillar menace is similar to the insect infestation that we faced in 1972. Technology has reached new heights today. We can use drones for the emission of pesticides.
The government at the time undertook steps to counter the menace caused by the brown hopper pest by even taking part in a walk in support of the farmers. If the Sirimavo Bandaranaike government in 1972 was able to address this problem, why isn't the current government able to resolve the Sena caterpillar menace despite the existence of latest technology?
Convening a media briefing today, founder of the National Namaluyana organization, Venerable Vanavasi Ramalathero, expressed the following views.
Such environmental damage has been caused by those politicians who are so much concerned about their votes and by those who help them. This ironwood tree you see behind me is 700 years old. What can we do once they are gone? There wasn't destruction like this since the war. However, large-scale environmental destruction is taking place now. Sand permits and gravel permits are being given away. They are destroying the trees. Yesterday, the Cardinal made a strong statement. We should let the animal in the jungle live in the jungle. I think soon these elephants will come to the golf phase. Today, elephants encroach airports. In future, people will not have to come here to watch elephants because the elephants will go to golf phase. That's all I have to say. I request that this matter be given attention.
Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa has instructed to slash the duty on bottled toddy by half while extending the opening hours of toddy taverns.
According to a directive issued by Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa, who is also the Finance Minister, the duty on bottled toddy that stood at 50 rupees a litre will be reduced to 25 rupees from today. Another directive seen by Newsfirst showed that the Prime Minister has also allowed to extend the opening hours of toddy taverns by 2 hours with effect from Friday. Taverns can now remain open from 10 AM to 2 PM and 5 PM to 9 PM. The previous times were from 11 AM to 2 PM and 5 PM to 8 PM. Prime Minister has also increased the amount of toddy permitted. Prime Minister has also increased the amount of toddy permitted to be sold to a person from 1.5 to 3 litres, amending a law dating back to 1985. Accordingly, a pass would be required when transporting more than 3 litres of toddy in the country.
Convening a media briefing yesterday, Youth for Justice Sri Lanka, which is a coalition of youth-led organizations and youth activists, expressed views regarding the cremation of COVID-19 victims in the country.
The mandatory cremations policy that's taking place in Sri Lanka right now is affecting how our Muslim and Christian brothers and sisters are laying their loved ones to rest. And we have a duty in our religion. It's important to understand that if anything, any aspect of my faith is going to be harmful for someone else, that I have to stay away from it. We are at a very unique time right now where all the scientific evidence is pointing in one direction, and that is that for any Sri Lankan that is affected by COVID, either cremations or burials can be chosen and it won't harm anyone. The WHO has been saying this from day one of the pandemic. Sri Lankan expert committees have been saying this, and over 185 countries in the world are doing this right now. So at a time like this, when the reality is that we are very divided, we can stay that way and we can keep creating misunderstandings, or we can come together and close this gap. And we urge the government to reverse this mandatory cremations policy in light of the scientific statements brought forward by the experts.
News First. The truth as it is.
China has locked down a city of 11 million people in its northern province of Hebei in an effort to contain the country's worst COVID-19 flare-up in months.
Residents of Shijiazhuang, a city located around 290 kilometers southwest of Beijing, have been placed under lockdown as major highways were blocked, train and bus stations closed and flights cancelled. The lockdown came as a total of 117 COVID-19 infections, including 67 asymptomatic cases, were detected in Shijiazhuang on Wednesday. China reported 123 local infections nationwide for Wednesday, the highest since late October.
According to the Hebei Provincial Health Commission, Shijiazhuang identified another 66 positive cases yesterday. Official figures show that a total of 304 positive cases have been reported in Hebei since the 2nd of January, most of which were in Shijiazhuang. The restrictions are some of the strictest imposed in China since the country largely contained the spread of COVID-19 in March. A citywide COVID-19 testing drive was soon rolled out for all its 11 million residents of Shijiazhuang. The deputy mayor said in a press briefing yesterday that more than 3,000 healthcare workers have been deployed from other parts of the province to carry out the mass testing drive. As of yesterday afternoon, more than 6 million samples have been collected and over 2 million samples have been tested.
With that, we wrap up Primetime News. I'm Bernadine Jaya Singha, and the interpreter for tonight is Taraka. Good night. Take care.